make this a bit of a technical session, but if you have any questions at a certain moment about something, so just raise your hand. I'll try to keep an eye on my camera here on the or on my screen on the left, so that we can combine this between a little bit of interaction and me trying to explain the whole link of open sourcing, licensing, and then the Zenodo who is attached to it. So I did try everything yesterday again to make sure that there's not too many issues there. So let me share my screen first. Yes. You should be able to see yourself or to see the screen. Where is it? Yeah. Okay. You see the PowerPoint at this moment?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So the idea especially is to introduce you all to the whole concept of version controlling, which for some people might be already known, yeah. But this is definitely something that I see if I also look at the repository that we have with the Decide project on GitHub. I see that there's not so many people that are actively using it, and I want to kind of make just some introductions there on the value, yeah, that it has if you would be doing it, and then I'll jump to showcasing. So I'll really showcase every step by step, but first let me introduce you a bit on the idea what it does. So what I typically often see with people is that they start indeed creating a project in which they make a tool, they make some code, yeah, and then what you will typically see is these kind of situations that happen where you have a whole bunch of file names where people start making versions of that file name, and then they have alternatives. In fact, one of the things that you should know is that you should try to have every piece of code or part of the project that you have in a file should only in fact be one. Yeah, there should be only one file being called mycode .r or mycode.python, depending on the tool that you're using. So this is what you try to do, and then especially this is a nice one, for example, where you say, okay, my code fixed, and this was for my supervisor, or it was for a submission, for example. Well, in fact, what you would like to do is you would like to snapshot a specific version that you send to a supervisor, and you want to keep track of it, but you also don't want to, let's say, clutter your file structure, because yeah, this doesn't make sense, and only you will be able to find out what this means. You want to move towards a single point of truth in all of this, and only say, for example, one version. Eventually, that would be the good thing to do, one version of the project, and then be able to reference that version. Yeah. So I sometimes also see people making different versions by zipping it, for example. Well, in GitHub and version control that is then linked to Zenodo, what will happen is you are able to use a release, the history, or forking to have different versions of the same project. And this is a bit technical, but a release is something like a stamp that you put on a project. History allows you to really go back in time and see, like, okay, what did I do when? Forking allows you to say, okay, really, I had a version 1 of the tool, and then in a version 2, it completely changed into, let's say, something else, but eventually that became the truth. So those tools exist, but in fact, there should be only one major tool that you create within your let's say code base, they call this typically. You can keep track of everything that has changed, and I don't know if you can see it well on the slides, but for example, this is the cattle barometer, and then what you will see is that we have Saba working on it, Then Jade, she was working on it. She did some commit. Yeah. And then me, I added something on top of it because there was a request as something was wrong. So in other words, I can keep track of who did what, when. Yeah. And it allows you so to also be transparent in that. Yeah. This is an advantage at a certain moment, yeah, to create trust. And I will give some examples there as well. You always have a working version of it, and then this means that you can go back in time to a version of the code that was working before you broke it. This is something typical that you see once in a while. You're working on a piece of a tool, and suddenly you break it. Yeah, how people would solve that right now is they would kind of create a copy of the code, and then they would say, okay, I'm working on it, I break it, and then they would go back to that copy because that one was not broken. That's not how you should do it. Yeah, in fact, what you can do in GitHub is you can do commits. Yeah, and those commits can be, you can go back in time. Yeah, so it's an important one. It's a functionality that maybe not in a project management is often used. Yeah, in code management is used really, really a lot because people want to go back to where things were working as before. So that's a functionality that is interesting that not a lot of people are aware of. You can track what went wrong. You can have a backup for a project. Yeah, you can make your project easier to find and install. So within the FAIR principles, it makes it interesting that you can just say like, hey, this is where I documented some things. And to install, to give you an idea, I don't think that at this moment I have any project anymore on my own computer that does not have version control on it. And the reason is I know that once in a while my whole environment will break, or my computer will break, or I do these strange things. And I want to be able to very quickly reinstall everything that I do. You often hear it from people that they say, look, I have a project, my computer crashed, and suddenly I'm stuck. If you have a good Git repository of your project, you can even include the whole environment of your project in there so that you can download it to your computer and that the install configuration will be picked up by the project itself, and it will, let's say, almost semi-automatically install the entire project for you on your computer, and it will run out of the box. So for those people who have a little bit of experience, R, for example, and Python do that as well. R has now something which is called renv. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to create a kind of a separate environment within your project that has all the necessary libraries. It has all the necessary, let's say, settings you need to run the entire project. But that means if you move computers or you move to somebody else's desktop, that he can have the same. Otherwise, what you get up with, and this is typical, somebody else wants to work on the project, and suddenly you have to go again through the whole thing of installing all the required libraries, and a piece of the code is not working because there is some dependencies there that are not there. So this is something that you can manage completely in a GitHub as well. You can even run. This is something that developers. I work with quite some of developers in my world, and then you can even have them run automatic tests on top of your code. So you can control who does what, and then who can also see what. So to give you that, oh, this was a bit too quick. Oh. I was hoping I was able to zoom. No, I cannot. So yeah. So these are right now the repositories that we have in our own GitHub on the Decide repository. And then what you can see is that some people have also locked the code. Yeah. So we can control it. So that's something that that's a misconception, and I will touch on the misconceptions a bit later. But one of the things that you can do is it's not because it's on GitHub that it's open for everybody. For example, these 2 papers or 3 papers and 4 repositories, they are locked. Only the people within the team can see it. Of course, then within the open sourcing community, it doesn't add anything. You locked it. Yeah. So that's so nobody else can see it but us. But that should not be a problem. For example, in the beginning, it could be that you want to move, you want to start building, and then eventually you open it. You can facilitate discussion about your work. So these are tools. So within your, for example, the case study website, I activated this yesterday because for the case studies, maybe it's not that really important. But for example, you can have issues and discussions there. That means that you could have people saying, look, I looked at your code and it doesn't work for me because of this issue. So in other words, you can get collaboration with others, yeah, and discussion about that. So some of the bigger projects in the world, yeah, if you go to the Python repository, you will see that there is tons of code of issues open, and the community is trying to solve them together. So that's something that allows you to also create that transparency that not everything is working, yeah, but it's at least it allows you to showcase that you're working on it. You can also see, for example, for me, I will often use a GitHub tool from somebody else if I see that there is discussion going on, issues going on, and that I see a lot of commits, that it's still really active. So you can also allow others to contribute to your work. That's something that is really scary for many people, but this is very useful. This is something, again, in my software world, I use this much more often, where you have pull requests. That means that somebody else can say, look, I fixed a piece of your code, and then you can get it from me. So they created their own branch of the code. That's what they call forking. And they fixed something, or they added something from themselves, and then they asked for a pull request. That means that you, as the owner of the code, you allow the other to inject that fix, that solution, for example, or an addition. You allow it that others bring it to your code as well. The good thing is, and this is something that really I would advocate. I do this really a lot. This I can say, and I'm trying to get as many students as possible to understand as well. This is the example of Yara, yeah. But you can make your code, article, or software available to others. But it doesn't mean that you have to. Again, so you can change the visibility to private. So I have some smaller project that I'm working on right now, which has some IP from a company in there. Well, it is on GitHub, but it's the visibility is only in the smaller team of students that we are working on together. So it doesn't mean that it's on GitHub that it's public. So that's something that you can decide upon. But it makes it reproducible, and this is an example from when I was still in Utrecht. This is a student that created a predictive model for using sensor data. And what we did in the material and methods, this is an exact sentence from there, is we said the populated ontology, which is so the ontology like we work on in work package 1, all of the code that was written to do it, even the data, they can all be found, on the GitHub repository. So we reference it like this. There's also a DOI if you want. That's something else. So what it really helps me is, before that, what I typically saw is that people would try in their material and methods to be very open on what they did in their statistical analysis. But nowadays, we see so many, let's say, the data intensity of some of the papers is so big, and the statistics used can be so different, that what I would do myself is I would put everything on GitHub when it comes to statistics, because for me, it allows me to tell the reviewers even, like, okay, this is the first version that we now submitted. Please, if you have questions about the statistics, I allow them to give me feedback in my materials and methods. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to convince them in a rebuttal anymore. I try to do that in the code. So we can say like, okay, you did a suggestion on the material and methods. Well, we've added it in the statistical code and it's open. And they can even see that you really did it, because when you commit, you will see that they did a review, it was sent back to you. Yeah, and then they will see that you worked on it. And then you can snapshot it as a new release until the moment where you can, let's say, have the eventual exception of some work. Building on the computational environment, based on your repository. This is something new. I'm using that only recently, but you can even right now, because of course GitHub is owned by Microsoft. Microsoft is adding the Azure backbone at this moment, and you can launch even a notebook, for example, within the environment that you want to have online. So Azure is offering right now, or Microsoft is offering you, that you can launch the entire R and R Studio, for example, environment within the browser, so that the student doesn't even need to work on R on his own computer anymore. This is something new, only I think maybe a year or two. But I wouldn't go into that immediately, because that's something that you probably will run into issues if you've never worked with GitHub before. And then this is why we started talking about it, of course. We have some compliance with funding and journal guidelines. So I'm also trying to push that more journals would really request to do this. Yeah. Not as that it's something that you can do, but you should do. And that's what we see in Europe as well, that they are requesting this to do it in Zenodo. You can make your software citable, and then that means that once your code is on GitHub, you can snapshot it through Zenodo, for example. There are other ways as well, but I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And it really aligns nicely with the fair data principles. You make it findable. Your code, tool, or data becomes findable. It's accessible if you set your repository to public. It's interoperable if you include a naming convention and a ontology for your data. This is, of course, a request that you then have to do. You have to put the data on there. But you don't have to. And then if all of these three FAI are true, then in fact, a lot of what you did becomes reusable or reproducible, whatever you want to use the last R for. Some misconceptions before I jump to the show or to the workshop or the demo. So misconception is that you give away everything. It doesn't mean that when you start using version control, that you're immediately open sourcing it. There is a difference between private and public. It just means that you create some transparency among co-workers. Yeah. When you open source the code, it doesn't mean that you have to open source the data at the same time. I will show you in a minute how you can do that. You can have the data separate from the code, and you can even have some tooling from GitHub to do that for you. You can still limit others from reusing it with a specific license to it. So it doesn't mean that when you say, look, it's open source, that you lose immediately every power. You can limit others in the usage by attaching a very specific license to it, or not. Yeah, that's something you can do yourself. But one of the things that I see most often, and that's why I'm glad that there's multiple people in the room also that maybe are technical, but even or as well as non-technical. It's not something for the technical people. It's something that the people managing those technical people, they should be almost automatically reflecting this behavior. Because if the managers don't see the problem or the benefit, the technical people will definitely not see the benefit. So, some of my students are in the call. They will understand now why almost in every meeting, when we review code or when we do something, I will ask to see a GitHub repository or a notebook, and I will hammer on this all the time. If within your organization, the people on top, they don't believe in it, that it's important, then the technical people will try to even avoid it, because there's a learning curve to it. But once you have, let's say, gone above the learning curve, yeah, then or you kind of level on top of that learning curve, then it becomes obvious again. Within my lab, there's not a lot of code anymore that is not version controlled. Yeah, even that some of it that you can see. So, but I want to hit on this again. It's really the people managing, the technical people, that need to believe in it. So if there are questions at this stage, I'm happy to take them while I'm switching to the showcasing a little bit of the how we can do it. All right, so let me start my R environment. I'm going to showcase it for R. Maria, go ahead in the meantime.
Yes, Will, sorry. I was just wondering, I mean, we have our own GitLab for SREC, and we've been writing lots of things there because initially we were using code, not code, data that cannot be shared. And we are ready now to share this. Is there a way of collating or getting a project from GitLab to GitHub?
I think in the backbone, GitLab works on GitHub. So you can definitely, I think if within GitLab, if it's your own hosted, probably you can make part of it open. So you can change the visibility of a specific repository from private within SURC to public. I think that's possible because the backbone, I think, of GitLab is GitHub, but it's then hosted by yourself. I never hosted something myself. That was something you see that in the past people were feeling more secure by hosting it, let's say themselves, and then they have it indeed, like you said, as RUC. But you can even, I think, within your own company's GitLab, make some of it public, unless the IT people restricted it. But you should talk to the people then. What you could do is you can also say GitLab, push it to the, let's say, the common GitHub in the cloud. So the one that Microsoft hosts. That's possible.
But that would not be the one assigned to the Decide project.
Yes, yeah.
Is it possible? Okay.
Yeah. So you could say like, okay, this specific repository, I want to make a clone out of it and push it to the one from the Decide project. That's definitely possible. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I see Suhib is in the call, and I'll just speak to him about this.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, you can talk to the people within within the company. They will allow you to do that. Okay, so we have currently 16 repositories. Yeah, one of the nice things that I can show you, if I switch here, is what I think is interesting here as well to see is how people use it. Yeah, and so what I see once in a while is that people, for example, this one is the purchase assistant from one of the work packages, and what you see is that indeed it was pushed once as a kind of a, okay, let's showcase to Europe that it's done, but in fact that's it. Nothing else happened ever since. So you can see that others, there are some over here. We have work package 2 deliverables. Then you see there is some activity here. Here the same with I saw something else. The livestock health ontology. Yeah, one push. Yeah, that's because we started using another one here. In fact, this is where you also see whether a project is alive or not. And you can say, yeah, but internally it's alive. But for example, if you want to prove Europe that something is alive, yeah, then maybe this is a way to do it. So you will see, for example, that on the case studies website, this is where we work on the barometer a lot. And the barometer itself, the cattle barometer, is here. You can see that there are some bumps, yeah, here and there. That's because we do once in a while we do an update or small. So it allows you to do some transparency here to do that. So and when it becomes public, then Europe can see, okay, they really worked on it. I recently saw an example from Europe where they even said, look, we checked the repository to see how the project evolved overall. and they really liked that different people were working. It was on an open source tool that they worked together, and that Europe used it in their compliance checking eventually. So let's make a repository. I will make a repository as a GitHub example. So I will say GitHub example. I also have one from yesterday. If there is a failure, then I can always show you that one. But let's try to show you that it really works and it's not so difficult to do. So the GitHub example, you give it a good naming convention name. Yeah, that's one of the things that you could think about. Again, I try to do that myself as good as possible, but it's always a bit tricky. Okay, I'm going to put this one on public. This is where you say public versus private. Yeah, always, this is a good thing to do. Always add a README file by default. That means that you give an explanation about what you're doing. I'm going to show you how a README file looks like within some projects. So in the kettle barometer, you will see that we have a README file which explains what we're doing. Yeah. So if I go to some of the other repositories that we have in the project, you will see. I don't know which one had little activity. What we don't like to see is that there isn't. Okay, so this is a good one. Yeah. So it allows other people, yeah, to understand. But I've seen some of the work packages that failed to create a good README file. The README file just gives some background to the whole project, allowing you to explain what you did. And GitHub offers to create it by default. Git ignore I would do. Git ignore is a way that you can tell Git that on your own computer there are specific things that you don't want to put in here, but you want to work with it. So for example, the data is a very good thing to have Git ignored. That means that there is no version control of the data. So if you are working in R, for example, then you can say, look, this template for R I want to use. And then GitHub offers some settings, and I will show you in a minute what happens because of that. I would then also it allows you to choose a license, which you can always change. But for example, I'm going to go for the CC BY if it's allowing me to do so, or the MIT license. I'm going to show you also how you can change it if you want. MIT allows people to reuse a lot of your work, but it excludes quite some of the liabilities. So it tells people like if a house burns down because you implemented my code, then it's not my problem. That's in fact what it's saying. So now we have a GitHub example code and it's public. Yeah. And then what we can do easily is you can click on this link. Yeah. And you copy it. And then you need to switch to your RStudio. So I'm going to start a new project. And this is something that probably some of you are doing already. But what you need to do is you need to work in an R project, not in just your R environment, because it's important that the project gets a base folder where it works in. My advice, however, is that the base folders, you should not put them in a folder that is also a OneDrive, a Google Drive, something that is a shared network drive within the company. Don't do that. Use something else, because otherwise you have GitHub continuously, let's say, monitoring, whereas OneDrive and G Drive are doing a bit of the same. So this way, you don't choose new directory or existing. You could, but then you have to do some other tricks. But if you want to do it from version control, you click the last, then you say Git. There's also Subversion. That's another tool that you can use for this. And then in the repository URL, you click this, the one that I just copied from the website. So that's this one here. Yeah. At the same time, it asks you where the directory name is. I would advise you to not change it. And then I put all of it inside of the projects. And it is in my OneDrive, you see, from Cornell. But I told OneDrive to not scan this project folder. So that's the reason why. So you can put it in a OneDrive folder, but then I explicitly told OneDrive to never sync that that specific folder. Otherwise, you see often that the both are continuously checking each other, and that's just using resources. So now it's switching to the R project, or R Studio is switching to the specific project, and then you will see that here in my working environment, in my home directory, I get immediately these kind of files, which is an exact copy of this one. And then everything can start. So what we can do, for example, is we can say like, I want to have a folder with all the data from my project. Yeah. And then inside of that, I want to have a specific file which contains the data, .csv. Yeah. And within that CSV file, there's now nothing. Of course, maybe I should have. I will create a blank text file that's maybe data.text, so I can change it. Yeah, so now I have a specific file, and I can say like there is some data in there. Now, so this is where I wanted to illustrate that it doesn't mean that when the data is in, yeah, that you have to share it also with the repository. So also now, if I would, so I have put it in my folder. Yeah, so I created a project with a data folder. If I will look online now, yeah, that data is not public and it's not in here as well. You see that. That's because when Git is installed in your RStudio, it's not automatically adding this all the time. It asks you to do things, and that's called a commit. So I will create another file, which is, for example, an R script, yeah, which is my test script. And then I will say in this script, also, I will say 1+1 just as a proof, yeah, and I save it. Now what you see is I have a data folder and I have a test R script, yeah. So in the Git tab on top, what happens is that GitHub starts asking you, hey, I see that things have changed. Yeah. So what I can say is, indeed, GitHub, you're right. I can click on it and I can say commit, and I can say this is, in fact, I worked on this file, and it will stage it, they call, and you can say I committed, yeah, my first R script. Here. You commit it, yeah, and then it's kind of not even in the cloud. I will show you how to do that. That's so committing means that you kind of create snapshots on your own computer of the work you did and you document it. Now, with the data, remember that there was a bit of an issue because you don't want to share the data within your project. So what you can do is you can click, and then you can here click ignore. So then it will add, in fact, I will show you, there is a very specific file, yeah, in your repository, which is called git ignore. And if you open it, it's just a text file. And then these are all default files that GitHub knows that it needs to ignore, because almost everybody in the world has said that they want to ignore this. That means, for example, a history, some temporary files, so things that really don't belong on your repository. But what it did is it now added your data file, so data files, into the Git repository. So, and if I save it, then you see that the git ignore file was changed. So I say, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I can say data folder, yeah, was added to git ignore. You commit it, yeah, and from this moment, everything that you put in the data folder will never be synced to the cloud. So then you exclude that this folder has any connection, let's say, to the cloud. I also have now my project that was changed. You could consider not pushing it, but I'll I'll do that. So project file update. You can also do that with multiple files at the same time. So I'm now doing this one by one. You don't need to. Now I don't have any changes anymore. It will detect it. Yeah, this will disappear. And now the trick is, here you see a push button. If I now say push, then you will see that now at this moment, Git is syncing in the cloud. I will show that by showcasing something. So if I go back now to my project, depending on whether it's already finished. No. Yeah, now it's done. These changes are immediate. So if you would go to the example now, you will see that I have, now what happened is, here you see the commits. I have now 4 commits because I committed 4 files with separate messages. I can see them. So I can say the initial, I committed my first R script, the data folder was added to the git ignore, and I had a project file that was updated. And then you see that the test R environment is 1+1. This is now added. Yeah. So this is, let's say, what's going on. This is the link between the R and, let's say, the GitHub. And what I do typically is, if I work on a project, that when I'm finished, just when the day closes, I try to commit all the files that I think are relevant, and then I push it to the cloud. That's how I typically work. Now, of course, now we get to the point of Zenodo. Yeah, Zenodo is kind of a way at this moment, yeah, for people to create digital object identifiers from it. And what you will see is, Zenodo is very proud of it, but the EU has really tagged it as a way to stamp data repositories, citations within their service. So, or within the European community. So they trust on Zenodo to do the digital object identifiers. So what I've done is I have created the community for Decide. So we have the Decide community, yeah, which I think I saw that Johannes was in the call. I think it's interesting to communicate this with the people from the European Union, because all of the Decide projects are automatically created within Zenodo at this moment. So our project was in there. And then we had a snapshot from Yara, her paper, that we put in. So you can more easily do it. So what happens is, you can link in your own profile, you can link your own GitHub account. Yeah. And if you go to your GitHub account, then it asks you to make a connection between the two. So if you do that, then you should, or if you create your account, then you should make that connection yourself. We cannot do that. That's completely independent from other people. And then what happens is, you can sync your GitHub, and I will do it now because I did it yesterday. So if I sync it, then what is happening at this moment is, it will scan for new repositories that have been added. These are a lot of my own projects that we didn't do this for in the past. But what's happening at this moment is, you will get, so because this project was added, Zenodo will pick it up, and it will ask if it should start creating or following it. Of course, then you will see that there's at that moment an error that happens within Zenodo. This is something out of our own hands. Let me see if it's working again, because I want to showcase that it's working from the beginning until the end nicely. Yesterday evening, when I tried it, everything was synchronizing nicely. Because the only reason why I'm doing this is because I added this today, this one, like while we were doing this together. And then, you see, then let me try to see if I can do this one. Aha, yes. You see here now I have the side project, GitHub example. That's the one that we just worked on. Yeah. So it is giving me, yeah, okay. So now it says repository synced successfully, please reload page. Now there's one last thing which is important to do, yeah, to make, in fact, this kind of a digital object identifier. And that's what Europe is trying to push us to. They're trying to push us as much as possible to start using that one. Now I need to sync again, yeah, because it's showing up in the sync list, but now I need to be able to see it here. I think I have it here. This is the GitHub example. Yes, all right. So now what happens is if you click on it, then it says, yeah, let's get started. You need to make a release. And this is something that people struggled with, but in fact, it's not so difficult. So what the release means is that you need to tell the code, like, look, I created a snapshot of it, and it's a working version, for example. Like what we did recently with Yara, her paper, is the code that we had up to that moment. That's the snapshot that we have. One of the things that you could do is you could say, look, my version 1 is the the version that was sent to the revision 1, and then you could have revision 2 and revision 3, or something that you could think about as it could be a release. And here on your own page, you have a release part. And in that release, you can say, look, this is version 1. It's the review 1 release. You can write something, you don't have to. And then you say publish the release. And then you will see that, you see here, a zip file is created. Yeah. And a tar file, this is for people working on Linux. This is automatically created. So, and then if you go to your code base now, then nothing has changed, and only here it says we have a release, a review 1 release that was the latest, the last active, the best one, whatever you want to name it. And the funny thing is now that what happens here, if you refresh it, you will see that at that moment, Zenodo has picked up the signal and it has created a DOI for it. You take that DOI, you take the DOI markdown file, you go to your R Studio, you go to the README file, and within the README file, you create the DOI link, you add it, you save the README file, we commit it, we have our first DOI established. You say commit and push. That means that it's being synced to the cloud. And normally, if all goes well, we go back to our code. Let me see. GitHub is a bit slow this morning or this afternoon for you. Yeah, there it is. Now, if I push on the refresh button, you will see that the DOI is added. Voila. So at that moment, if you click on this one, you will go to Zenodo, yeah, and it will show you the latest version that you snapshotted, that you stamped. And then there's one last thing that you can do to make it completely transparent to Europe. Then you can say it's part, submit to the site. So I think if I say my communities, I can do it easier. So I have my Bovi-Analytics lab, but I can say I selected to the one from the side project. And at that moment, now, if I go back to the Zenodo communities, yeah, you will see that now we will have 2 repositories. Yeah, I still need to probably accept it because the ownership is happening automatically. I probably will have gotten an email, but I need to accept it. Yeah, that's probably one last thing. Other requests. Yeah. Now yeah. So I need to accept it. That's because of the ownership there. Yes. And now we can go here to the communities and you will see that we have 3 repositories. Yeah. So now this is exactly what the people from Europe want to see, that within our own community, more of these releases start being pushed, and that some of these repositories start showing activity as well. So it is a link again between your R environment. I know that a lot of you people are using R. If you want to do this for an environment in Python, all the tools that I just showed you within R are also this also is exactly available in PyCharm, for example. There's many online tools that allow you to do this also for the for online environments. Yeah. There's only one thing I want to show. Imagine like you want to change the license. You need to have a license file which has the name license in capital without any extension, so not .txt or doc or whatever. And you need to use this one here, needs to represent something which is typically done by the different licensing opportunities. So to give you an idea, yesterday I was working on one and I oh, damn it, yes. And I used the Creative Commons one. So we wanted to use the Creative Commons one. Now, what you can do then, if you think like, I want to change it, so license, you say choose, there it is, choose Alliance licenses. You can find these licenses on the website. For example, imagine that you want to say, I want something else. I think I had one. Where is the? I'll do it.
I'm sorry, Emil. I think you've turned your mic off.
Yes, by accident. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. That was by accident. I said that I was updating my license. I make a push, and normally, if all goes well, now we changed the license online, so that people have another license that is now added to the specific repository that we were looking at. So I will go there again, GitHub. I hope it's synchronized already. The repositories, GitHub example. Yeah, and then you already see that the license is changed to a CC by 4. That's the other one that I just changed. So it is now what you need to know is at this moment, the review 1 release still has the old license and this one has a new license. So you would need to make a new snapshot. So you could say like, okay, we drafted a new release. The release you don't do that often. Update release, update license. and you probably will need to say it's version 2. Yeah. Publish release. The moment that I do this now, I just did it. So we have 2 releases, one with the old license, one with the new license. And now in Zenodo, there will be an updated digital object identifier, which I can then use again. Yeah. And then you kind of start in that loop. To give you an idea, myself, I rarely create multiple releases. Yeah. Because I'm only using, let's say, a project, and I try to create it up to the digital object identifier, which I then use. But from a software perspective, people that are creating software, they really will create multiple releases all the time. So the release thing is something that you will not do a lot. That's more something that you will do once in a while, maybe. But it's an important step because that's the one that is needed to get your digital object identifier and link it to your Zenodo account. All right. Any other questions? I heard the chat popping up once in a while, but could also be people that are leaving. Jonathan requests from the GBots. Yeah, I cannot hear. That's my problem that I pushed the button of the mic probably. Yeah, and then other people jumping. Any other questions? Happy to help.
I have one question. So you mentioned that briefly, I think. When you have a publication where you use a code for it, do you usually like attach the code somewhere or make it available?
Yeah.
I think you showed it, but is it something that you really do on a regular basis?
Yeah. Let me show you from some of the publications that I did with Miriam on another project. So if you will, but I need to switch my. I'll not really switch, but so what I typically do is repositories, and I will showcase the one from Peter. So these are all different publications from a specific author, a PhD that we did. And then what I will do is I will, so this is the publication, yeah, and then I will keep it private until it's published because I cannot disclose, yeah. And then what I do is in the about, I will put the title of the publication. In the website link, I put the reference from the article, yeah. And then I say that it's published so that I can keep track of which one are published and which one are still not. And then the DOI is often then also referenced in the paper. But you can have double DOIs for the same publication then, because if you go to this +1, you will also see that the journal itself, they also have a DOI. You see that they create their own DOI system. So this is the DOI for the publication. And then this would be the DOI for the code. That's the only downside, but you cannot, I don't think that +1 would be willing to say we're not going to create a DOI and only have one. So you get the DOI, which is the code, but then in here, I try to adjust the README so that it reflects the same article at the same time. I recently had also somebody where I attached the abstract in the README so that you know which one it is about. Does that answer, Johannes? You look a bit confused.
It goes a bit fast for me. So my question is, I'm asking more for the people in Decide. Would you recommend that they always have a version of the code that they used for a certain publication to store that alongside the publication?
Yeah. So to give you, sorry for that. This repository here is exactly the complete code alongside an article. This is 100% transparent, and we used it also to show reviewers that there was what happened. So in this one, we had eventually, I don't know how many commits we had, 26 commits, that happened from the beginning until the end. Now, I must say that this is not entirely true, because the 26 commits, there was a lot happening before, but in the first commit, the guy that worked on it, he accidentally added some sensitive information. So we created a second version of it. Yeah, and that one has only 26 commits. But it's exactly what you say. You create a copy of that, you have the article, and alongside you have the code.
So exactly for that, you could go back
Yeah.
and reproduce the results somehow.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting to see that you can find a video, for example, on a Horizon project that Europe showcases as, okay, this is very transparent, that they really show what the different people did in here. One of the things, for example, Johannes, that I saw is that some people on Zenodo also do a version control on the temporary reports. So what you do now in the in-between reports is you say in your work document, okay, this person did it, then this person did it. But that's something that Europe says, yeah, but you can change the dates in there. I think you don't do that. I think you do that very transparently. But Europe has, so there is an example where they say, look, we also have version control on the document for the interim reporting, so that they can see that people actually worked on it and did timestamp it. I never thought about it, but it creates transparency. That's what Europe wants to do. They want to be sure that people worked on it because now, for example, for the work package, the side one on the barometer, yeah, there's little we cannot prove, or I'd say we cannot unprove that we didn't work on it. So you can go back in time for all the moments that we worked on it, and what we did and why we did it. That's completely transparently. Yeah, and that's what they want to see, I guess.
Yeah, thanks.
I know it's a bit technical, but I think that's also the thing that we need to overcome. Once you get used to it. In the beginning, I didn't like it as well because it gave me some pain. It slowed me down, but now it's part of how I work all the time. And if it becomes part of how you work, it helps you. Okay, I guess people will be running to other meetings as it's 9 o'clock, but I can take another question if you want. Maybe, can you please tell us where we can find more material on this? Yeah, that's an easy one. If you Google for GitHub R Studio tutorial, you can find really detailed step-by-step guides how to do this. Yeah, and it would exactly do what I did today. And then if you would say GitHub Zenodo releasing, then you will find tutorials to link one to Zenodo to the GitHub. So I can send you to the right ones, but most of them that you Google, you will find very, very good tutorials how to do this. Videos, anything you want. All right. Good. Then it's time to jump to our...
Thank you very much.
No problem at all. No problem at all. If anybody needs something or some guidance, just let me know, or Yara, or anybody in our team. There's quite some experience already there. Okay. Thank you very much. Talk soon.
Thank you.